What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another episode of NHL Overpaid or Underpaid. Between free agency and all the massive extensions we have seen players sign over the last few months, I thought now would be a perfect time to do this. If you've never seen one of these videos before, it's a pretty simple concept. Basically, I just ask you guys on the community tab to name a player and their contract, and I pick out a bunch of your guys' comments and give my thoughts on if I think the players that you commented are overpaid or underpaid. If this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more interactive NHL content just like this all throughout the year, we do videos like this very often, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're getting super close to 80,000. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and start off with the first comment. This one comes from Caps Coverage, who says, the former Hurricanes defensemen and their replacements, did Carolina make the right choice choosing cheaper options in Walker and Ghost versus holding on to Pesce and Shea? So we're going to do a bit of rapid fire here, starting off with Brett Pesce, who signed with the New Jersey Devils, $5.5 million per season for 6 years. I think it's a very fair deal for Brett Pesce, who has been one of the more reliable middle pairing two-way defensemen over the last 6-7 years. His offensive production was down this past season, but it's not like Brett Pesce was ever really a guy that's known for his offense. I think him, along with Brendan Dillon, really round out the Devils' top six nicely. Their blue line on paper looks very good. At 29 years old, and this being a 6-year deal, maybe the final year or two don't look great, but I really don't ever envision this contract becoming a problem for New Jersey. I think it's fair value. Brady Shea is up next, who signed a 7-year deal with the Nashville Predators, a cap it of $7 million per season. I do feel like this deal is a little bit rich for Brady Shea. That being said, it wasn't a surprise to see him get this kind of contract, given the fact that he was coming off of a career year. The Predators are really banking on Brady Shea to continue to play the way he played for Carolina this past season, and they're also banking on his game to age really well. He's already 30 years old. With this being a 7-year deal, there's definitely quite a bit of risk involved, but I do feel like even if it may be a slight overpay, this contract should be fine for at least the first 2, 3, maybe 4 years. And now finally, we have the two players that the Hurricanes brought in free agency. Sean Walker, who signed a 5-year deal with Carolina for a cap hit of $3.6 million per season, and Shane Gostisbehere, who signed a 3-year deal with a cap hit of $3.2 million per season. If you've watched most of the content on this channel since free agency, then you would probably know I'm a big fan of these two signings for the Hurricanes. It is going from Brett Pesce and Brady Shea to Sean Walker and Shane Gostisbehere an upgrade? I wouldn't say so, but with who was left on the market at the time Carolina made these signings, I think they got fantastic value. They didn't overcommit to either guy, especially Shane Gostisbehere. After the season he had with the Red Wings, I thought a team was going to massively overpay for him, but that is not what happened, and I actually think $3.2 million a season for Gostisbehere is a bit of an underpay. He's a player the Carolina Hurricanes are obviously familiar with. He had a brief stint in Carolina before, and he performed pretty well. Walker and Gostisbehere are both players that I think are going to fit Carolina's system very nicely. They're mobile defensemen who can move the puck up the ice quickly. Do they have their defensive warts? Sure. Shane Gostisbehere especially, definitely more so than Sean Walker, but that's another reason why I'm a big fan of them going to a team like Carolina, because the Hurricanes have such a strong, structured team defense, and they should be able to insulate any defensive deficiencies that Walker and Gostisbehere have pretty easily. Moving on now to the next comment. This one comes from Brenda Phillips, who says, Caden Gooley, 6-year contract with an annual value of $5.55 million per season. Low risk, high reward for me. Injury is the only real question, but to me is already a top 4 30-point two-way defenseman. I'm guessing you meant two-way defenseman, not three-way. Is a little over $5.5 million a season for Caden Gooley a massive underpay right now? I wouldn't say so, but I really believe this contract has the potential to look like a massive steal for the Montreal Canadiens within the next year or two. It's not a huge sample size, but Caden Gooley has already shown a ton of promise at the NHL level, despite playing very tough minutes on a Montreal team that hasn't been the greatest over the last 2 years since Caden Gooley has became a full-time NHLer. His defensive numbers have been rock solid. I don't think Caden Gooley is ever going to be a prolific point-producing defenseman. I would say he probably caps out somewhere in the range of 40 to 50 points a season, which is obviously still very solid, especially if he continues to play as well defensively as he has so far in his NHL career. Caden Gooley has all the makings of being a fantastic number 2, number 3 defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens, and at a little over $5.5 million a season, especially with the cap continuing to rise, I think that is fantastic value. The next comment we have comes from Ryder Holloway, Norway, who says, Brock Faber, 8 years, 8.5 mil, seems maybe a bit risky considering he's only played one full season, even though he looked great. I do feel like it's fair for people to say that there is risk involved here, like you said, given the fact that he's only played one full season, but I'm fairly confident just based off of the one full season we've seen of Brock Faber that this is a contract that's going to age very well for Minnesota. As a rookie this past season, Brock Faber quickly established himself as the Minnesota Wild's #1 defenseman, especially after Jared Spurgeon went down. Faber finished his rookie season with 47 points, playing in all 82 games. His defensive game was strong. He's a guy the Minnesota Wild used in every situation. He not only led all NHL rookies in ice time, averaging around 25 minutes a game, but he was actually 6th in the entire NHL in ice time per game, only behind Dahlin, Seth Jones, Michael Matheson, Drew Doughty, and John Carlson. It is insanely impressive that Brock Faber was able to be as productive as he was this past season for Minnesota, playing those kind of minutes as a 21-year-old defenseman on a Wild team that had a rough year. In my opinion, it was very smart for the Minnesota Wild to lock Brock Faber up long-term, as opposed to giving him a 2 or 3 year bridge deal. Sure, a bridge deal would have given the Minnesota Wild a lot more certainty and clarity in terms of, what Brock Faber is, as opposed to just a 1-year sample size. But if, say, that is what happened, they gave him a bridge deal and Faber continues to progress over the next 2-3 years like everyone's expecting him to, then at the end of that bridge deal, the Wild probably would have had to give him an absolutely massive contract, one much larger than the one we're talking about now. Moving on now to the next comment. This one comes from the best defenseman, who says, Quinton Byfield's contract at 5 years for 6.25 mil per, and also really appreciate the kind words and I'm glad you enjoy the videos. I may be overreacting a little bit here, but I really believe this contract has the potential to be one of the biggest steals in the entire NHL. Quinton Byfield is a superstar in the making. The underlying numbers are fantastic. He's a guy who plays with a ton of poise in all areas. Had a breakthrough year offensively this past season with 20 goals and 35 assists for 55 points in 80 games, despite playing only around 16.5 minutes a night, a number that I'm expecting to rise pretty significantly as soon as next season. Sure, the LA Kings didn't buy too many UFA years here, with it only being a 5-year deal, and at the end of this 5-year deal, they're likely going to have to back up the Brinks truck and give Quinton Byfield a massive extension to keep him around. But until then, for these next 5 years, I think the LA Kings are going to get fantastic value. I'm going with underpaid here. Moving on now to the next comment. This one comes from Jonah Craft 7, who says, Travis Konechny, 8 years, 8.75 mil per season. This is a very polarizing extension. I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about this on Twitter when the news broke. I definitely think it's a lot more than I expected a Konechny extension would come in at if he were to be extended by Philadelphia, but I also don't think it's some awful contract like a lot of people are making it out to be. Travis Konechny is an elite offensive player who's now scored 30 plus goals in back-to-back seasons. He's only 1 year removed from a season in which he was over a point per game with 61 points in 60 games. If Travis Konechny is able to produce like that throughout the majority of this contract, be a guy that can get you 30 to 35 goals in a season and be around a point per game, then I expect this deal to be fine. In my opinion, Konechny is the heart and soul of the Flyers. He's led the team in points now in 3 consecutive seasons. I think he's going to end up being a future captain for Philly. Next season will be the final year of Konechny's previous contract that carries a cap hit of 5.5 mil per season, so if they weren't going to trade him, it was very important that they get him locked up long term. This is not the kind of player that a team like Philadelphia can risk losing for nothing in free agency. So while I do think this is still a slight overpay, I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people are making it out to be. I would say maybe it's an overpay by 1.5 or 1.75 mil. Like if this deal came in at 8 years, 7 mil per season, then I think a lot of people would have a different tone about it. The next comment we have comes from Retro Vibes, who says, Natchez, 6.5, 2 years. AAV seems a bit high to me for such a short-term deal. I feel like that is kind of the general consensus when it comes to this extension. Me personally, I'm not that surprised that the AAV came in at that high of a number. I mean, this is a guy who's only one season removed from putting up a career high 71 points in 82 games in the 22-23 season. I think the most surprising part about the Natchez extension, aside from the AAV, is just the fact that it happened at all. I mean, this is a guy that has been heavily involved in trade rumors all summer long. Obviously, based off of this extension, nobody was willing to give up the kind of package the Carolina Hurricanes were looking for, so they then shift focus to extending him and kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit. I say kicking the can down the road because I do still feel like Natchez will will be traded out of Carolina at some point, because this 2-year extension walks Necas straight to unrestricted free agency when the deal is up. So I feel like he gets traded before we get to that point. Probably not this summer, but maybe in the final year of the deal. In terms of if I think he's overpaid or underpaid, though, I guess maybe overpaid slightly based off of his production from this past season. But again, we know what Necas is capable of. If he's able to get back to being that 70-point player, then I think 6.5 mil per season is very fair, if not underpaid a little bit. Next up, this comment comes from a user who says Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 5 years, 4.75 mil a year. This is definitely an interesting one. Pekka Luukkonen was pretty bad in 2022-23, and then this past season he was very good. If I had to guess, I think he probably levels out somewhere in between. Obviously, if Pekka Luukkonen continues to play the way he did this past season throughout the majority of this contract, then this deal's probably going to look very good for Buffalo. But given the fact that this is a 5-year deal and the sample size of Pekka Luukkonen at the NHL isn't huge, there's definitely risk involved here, but I definitely think it is a reasonable gamble to make if you're the Buffalo Sabres. Like I said, Pekka Luukkonen was very good for them this past season. He's only 25. Sure, it's a 5-year deal, but it's not like the AAV is insanely high or anything like that. And now finally finishing out the video with a comment from Redwings_X, who says Joe Veleno new deal, 2.75 I believe he got for 2 years. I think it's not bad, but not good. Feel like we could have gotten a player just as good for just at 2 mil or less. I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. I really think it's going to be a non-consequential deal one way or the other. It's a short-term deal. It's not like it's for a ton of money. I do think 2.75 mil is a bit of an overpay for a fourth-line center, but Veleno is only 24 years old and has seen his offensive production improve year after year. Put up a career-high 12 goals and 28 points this past season. If he can take another step within the next year or two and develop into more of a third-line center that can produce 35 to 40 points, then I think this deal is fine. So that is going to wrap up this episode of NHL Overpaid or Underpaid. As always, when it comes to these interactive videos, I want to give a huge shout out and say thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to come up with a comment and leave it under the community tab post. Even if your comment wasn't featured in the video, just know I read every single one, and I appreciate all of you guys. You all make these interactive videos so much fun for me to do. If you made it all the way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to leave a like. It definitely does help with the videos a ton, and it is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.